So, hello, Sean. How you doing today?
Hey, what's poppin'?
You know,
What's crack-a-lackin'?
I think people enjoy the Q&A.
I do too. I do too. The Q&A has been working really good for the show. I think it's beneficial. I get more people respond to it, more people engage with it. So the Q&A style for this season, I think, was perfect to kind of help lay a foundation for the Better Days Rain mission.
A lot of times I sit here and I ask you questions. Chris and I both kind of take turns asking you questions, and they feel a little too scripted at times. Even though we are following a script, obviously we try to keep
Yeah.
the show concise and on point. Um, I hear a lot of conversations lately around identity.
Okay. All right.
So, allow me to share since I'm not on camera. Right. Um, identity means different things to different people. There are, what we call non-player characters a lot of times.
Right.
The people that just live their daily life. They have no goals, ambitions. They just go to work, pay their bills, and they're happy, right? Or they're miserable and don't know how to fix it, right?
Right.
When you were in addiction was your identity. Is that a good assessment?
I mean, in a nutshell, right? My addiction always came first, but you're looked at in a lot of different aspects. You're looked at as a junkie, an addict. You're looked at as kind of like the scourge of
But
the
those are
earth.
what people call you,
Right.
right?
Well,
So
when you're called those things for so long,
you believe it.
you start to believe it. You know what I mean? And you think less of yourself, so you expect less of yourself, and you kind of just fall into this self acceptance of I am what I am.
We've talked about the guilt for being an addict for years. You feel guilty about things that you did or things that you didn't do,
Right.
right? In regards to like forgiveness, your identity now, would you say you've become a more forgiving and compassionate person?
Absolutely, bro. Forgiveness for me opened the door to real recovery. Right. I've been in recovery since 2021, and but I was still holding on to a lot of my past.
Sure.
A lot of it was still eating me up. Um, the negatives in my life were still superseding the positives for a long time. So it was very hard for me to shift that train of thought and start focusing on some of those positive aspects when there was just so much negativity, right? And a lot of that was like my own self hate and guilt. You look back on your life and you feel bad about the way you treated your family, the way you treated your kids, the way you treated other people, and look and how you treated yourself, right? So when I kind of came to this realization that things needed to change and I didn't know how to do it, forgiveness kind of just happened.
Right.
Um, I, I I came from a place where I didn't feel deserving of forgiveness from my family, friends, God, everybody. I didn't feel it. So when it happened, right, um, it helped me. Like I had to look back on my life and say, you know what I'm saying? How can I be grateful and some of the really bad things that happened? And for me, I had to attach a positive emotion to one where I was holding all this hate, guilt. I had to forgive. I had to do the exact opposite. I had to flip the perspective on it, right? Going from a hateful place, learning how to love. So forgiveness for me really opened the door. And if you want to know how it like kind of came into play, right? It was my wife. We were we started off our relationship was started off kind of rocky. Um, but I wasn't necessarily a good man to her. Um, I was still pretty arrogant, selfish. I was dealing with my own mental health issues as far as like dealing with hate. I hated myself deeply. And so, but when she refused to give up and really shined through a really dark moment in my time, uh, I saw it. And she was like that light in the darkness and still is. So when I had to look back and say, if she can forgive me for all the things that I've done, if God can forgive me for all the things that I've done, then I should be able to forgive myself and forgive everybody else who's ever done me wrong. And I'll tell you another thing I had to learn about forgiveness, man, is forgiveness isn't always about other people, right? It's not always about, we make amends to try to right our wrongs, but other people don't necessarily have to accept it, right? So it's up to me to forgive. And once I did, man, it freed me from the burden of it. It was liberating, right? I didn't have to carry it around on my shoulders anymore. I stepped into a new person. So when you're talking about like identity, man, it really helped shape the new me into a very more compassionate person. I don't have very much hate in me anymore. I'm pretty humble. I do lots of service work, love doing service work.
Well, when you're doing things that aren't good for you, like you're using or
Right.
eating unhealthy, like there was a whole slew of things that we can nitpick, right? That self-hate that you felt, how did you get over that? Not just forgiveness of that, but what have you done in your life to make changes? And I know we've asked this question 100 different ways when it comes to, your recovery, but you're in recovery. So when you catch yourself doing something that you shouldn't be doing, how do you discipline yourself, use the discipline and tools that you've learned to make a change, to stop doing those things that hurt you or maybe hurt other people, like being hateful?
I man, honestly, I had to learn how to start attaching positive emotions to bad things, right? Instead of just looking at a bad thing and letting it fester and bring me down, I had to use those as stepping stones, right? I had to go through this so that way I could learn this and use it this way, right? And I think that's kind of like how our identity kind of falls in line with our purpose in life, and when we are in addiction, there's not a whole lot of purpose there, right? I think a lot of people who are in addiction have kind of lost their purpose in life and they're just kind of floating through, kind of lost, right? And so for me, I had to find a purpose. I had to find a reason to change. I had to take 25 years of failure, 25 years of drug addiction, and flip the script on it, right? And it's what I did with it that allowed me to forgive myself and to, be grateful for those things. Like I'm grateful for all my hardships. I went through a really hard time last year and it kind of ate me up at first, but to see what has transpired because of it and how that really bad thing has molded this last year of my life into a really beautiful, you know, um, future, right? I'm grateful for it. So it's taking all that negativity and being grateful for it. And every man needs a mission in life. I'm a firm believer in that. If you don't have a mission, you just got to kind of take a leap of faith and start moving in a direction, and your purpose will find you. And I'm a firm believer in that. Like my purpose found me, and it found me through the form of a book. You know, I was actually sitting in a jail cell, and I was reading a book called Martyrs for Jesus, and it's a it's not a really long book, but it's about 300 stories of people who died really horribly in the name of Jesus Christ, right? All over the world, and just awful stories. And at the end of this book, it goes through every country in the world and it talks about missionary work and how the the word of God is snuffed out in a lot of countries. And it's a lot. Like I was shocked when I read it because you're not from like a modern, what do you call it? If you're not from like America or Europe or something like that, like it's pretty much snuffed out everywhere else. Christianity is pretty much, and missionary work's illegal. Bibles are illegal. You know, um, And I had already had kind of like this foundation that I had built in recovery. And so I felt like that was God giving me my purpose, right? And as I was reading through there, I was seeing the absence of God, thinking to myself, there's a lot of places that have the absence of recovery, you know, drug addiction. So, and so I kind of molded this understanding that that's what God wanted me to do, was to step out and, help people get off of drugs. That's been my mission ever since then.
Well, and so that's your recovery identity, right?
Yeah.
That's who you are. Um, Now you want to help people find their purpose and their identity.
Right.
And I think when you're living a life that you're doing things that hurt you, whether it be drugs, alcohol, eating, I'm using those things that because we all know the impact of being unhealthy, making bad choices.
Yeah.
What would you say is the biggest identity problem you see in recovery for other people right now? What's a challenge that you face as a coach when it comes to identity and what people are feeling or seeing about themselves in the recovery community?
Um, so one of the things I kind of don't agree with, right? And when you go into AA meetings or CR or whatever kind of recovery meeting, they usually want you to identify as an addict, right? You go in there, you identify, hey, I'm so and so, I'm an addict, or I'm an alcoholic, or I'm a gambler, whatever it is, whatever your addiction is. They want you to identify as that, and it bothered me because after about a year of going to these meetings, the only time I ever wanted to use was when I was in those meetings.
Well, and that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which is when people call you a degenerate or they call you a junkie or whatever, you start to believe that. So your
Right.
words have power.
Correct.
So to me, it seems these institutions like AA are actually just per, they're perpetuating the cycle in a way
I agree.
because your self-talk is important.
Yeah.
How you see yourself. So to me, you should come in and I used to give you a hard time at how you introduce your show. Every time you come in, I'm Shawn Daniell. This is Better Days Rain.
Yeah.
But the reason why I did that is because that's how I felt. That's how I saw it. I've
Yeah.
only been to a handful of meetings to support friends when they've hit milestones or when they're struggling. And to me, that was always a problem. I saw that as an issue because I know that self-talk's important.
Well, and it's like if I wouldn't go to a job interview, I'm not going to walk in there and say, "Hey, my name's so and so. I'm a heroin addict. Please hire me. I promise I won't do it on the job."
Yeah.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? I wouldn't go if I was dating a girl. I wouldn't go introduce myself to her parents as a drug addict. You know what I mean? So why would I do that in a meeting,
Well,
right? Especially because
and the purpose and the intent behind that was to recognize you have a problem.
yeah, it's to recognize you have a problem. And
So once you're in recovery and you're on the road to recovering from that issue, that's the past. And
right,
and so if we can't look forward and all we ever do is focus on the past, guess what we tend to do? I mean, the history shows us that we repeat those cycles.
right,
You may not become, a user again, but you may revert to something else that's more damaging and self-destructive. And
correct.
and I think that something we haven't really talked about is the self-destructive behaviors that we supplement. We kind of started down this road in another episode that we haven't published yet, but we talked about replacing uh, nicotine. Right?
Yeah,
It's like alcohol.
I'm
Some
working on it.
some people stop heroin and start using alcohol again. Right?
Yeah,
So I don't know. I think you asked if we could freestyle today's show, and that's kind of where I see us going. Is the identity of a recovering addict should be filled with hope.
it should. It
And
should,
so,
right? And it's about flipping the
yeah,
perspectives, right? It's about taking who I was and 180ing it, becoming a new person altogether. And I had a mentor tell me, and I was sitting in his office and I was we were talking about my addiction. He looked at me and he said, "Do you feel like an addict anymore? Are you using? Do you feel like an addict anymore?" And I told him, I said, "No." And he said, "Man, then quit calling yourself one. Just simply quit calling yourself one." You
Well,
know,
and I think that perpetuates a cycle of shame.
and it helped. It helped, right? And so I had to start looking at some of this stuff when I was going to meetings and saying, like, because a lot of times meetings are focused very negatively. It's always about what I was doing in my addiction, right? And it usually involves people crying, and you know what I mean? It gets really emotional. So for me, I had to step out of that for a little while, and right, and stop being so consequence focused, right? 'Cause I think here in our society, we live in a world full of fear, right? Where everybody's focused on consequence, and especially addicts, man. Like we feel like we're walking on eggshells all the time, and so for me, I had to stop thinking about the consequence and start thinking about the rewards,
Yeah.
right? I had to stop looking at the consequences in my addiction, start focusing on the rewards of my recovery, and run with it, right?
That's great because that leads exactly to my next question. How do you, as a coach, help people construct a better, new, and improved self-image when they're struggling in their recovery or
uh,
when they're in recovery?
as a coach, you put a lot on. You try to just guide people, right? The whole point of being a coach is to help someone become self empowered, right? So it's about not necessarily doing the work for them,
But it's
you
giving
know,
them tools
but
and
it's giving them tools and
techniques.
insight. You know what I mean? We don't call it advice; we call it suggestions. You know, but it's just kind of giving people another look, right? Sometimes we have people who come in and they want to get sober, but they don't want to go to treatment or they don't want to go into sober living, right? And they're homeless, right? And stability is a must.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I know this from my own self experience, right? There was many times in my addiction where I wanted to get sober, where I wanted something better, right? But then I would go apply for a job and I'd look down at my feet, busted up shoes, or I'd have tears in my shirt, or I hadn't showered in a week. You know what I mean? And guess what? I didn't go to those interviews because had that negative self image of mine, right? So that's one of those things that treatment helps you with. They cover your basic needs. So that way I can focus on some of those better things, quit all the negative image that surrounds me.
So to me, I think recovery should do two things. Should help the person in recovery. Then we should do kind of what you're doing now, which is educate people on what it actually means to be in that situation.
Yeah.
Because right now what I see is a major lack of empathy.
Huge lack of empathy.
And that's from the non-addicts, right?
Right.
But you get guys like
Well, and it's
myself
from
and
addicts too, bro. Like I don't want to get it twisted,
oh
right?
no, you're
You
right.
know what I'm saying? Because there's just as much judgment that comes from addicts as non-players. I've gone to many meetings, right? Because I was a heroin addict, and I've gone to AA meetings where they're like, "You can't talk about your heroin addiction in here. We don't do that in here. We talk about alcoholism." You know what I mean? Without the understanding of addiction, no matter what it is. If it's tearing my life apart, if it's breaking me down, then I've given my power to something, right? I'm not powerless. I simply gave it away.
Right.
I gave it away, and I got to figure out how to get it back. And that's why I'm here.
We talk a lot about political and social issues in the studio.
Y'all ain't never gonna let me go on that.
No, but
I was just
but
kidding.
I think where the disconnect is you look at normal people. They don't have those tough conversations.
Yeah.
They don't want to have a tough conversation. Your family didn't want to have those tough conversations with you because of the hurt and pain.
No.
But those conversations have to come either within yourself or with your family for there to be forgiveness. Because yes, the offended person is hurt. Your family
And
wanted
that's the
you
thing. It's
your family wanted you clean and sober, but they were helpless and hopeless. They
Right.
themselves were hopeless. So when you're now in recovery, how do you think your family feels now? I mean, I know your family's told you, so share how your family is now versus then.
Man, so when I was in addiction, me and my dad, we really couldn't stand each other, to be honest with you. You couldn't keep us in a room together for longer than an hour, or we would be at each other's throats. Um, and a lot of that was me, a lot of that was him, right? We both had anger issues, and kind of both of us being alpha males. You mix that up with a whole lot of disagreements, and it just turns into a brawl. So me and my dad didn't talk for about 20 years. Um, and he actually went into recovery before I did, for his anger issues. And then when I went into recovery, everything kind of changed, right? Because we both fell into this self acceptance that we were both wrong. Wasn't just me, wasn't just him, but we both had a role to play, right? And it was so when I talk to families now, I say, okay, what role did you? And when people haven't reached that point of self acceptance, that maybe I was wrong too, it turns into a very offensive conversation, right? They're like, I didn't do nothing wrong. He did it to me. You know what I mean? It immediately goes there.
Finger pointing is fun.
So then you have to break it down. You know what I'm saying? We have to really break it down and get both parties on the same page to where, okay, maybe I was flawed in the way I thought. Maybe I reacted in a way, because we're all not the same, right? Some people are about tough love. I was never one that grasped that tough love concept, right? My family did it to me, and what happened was I rejected it, and I chose to stay away. So, and I think a lot of people are like that. Some people who I guess are say like more submissive, they're more adapt to that, right? They need somebody to kind of jam them up, and they take it. Where other people are like, "No, you ain't gonna treat me like that. I'm out." And I have to look at that in my coaching. Okay, if I come down on somebody like a ton of bricks, right? They trust me to help them. I come down on them, and they walk out that door and never come back. Did I do them a favor? Did I help them in any way? Right? Because in my own experience, right, where we say, I'm gonna help you, I'm gonna be there for you, and we're gonna get through this, and then you screw up and they immediately put your ass out the door, that turns into betrayal, right? And usually that person's gonna abandon it. And the addict mind says, once something goes wrong, I'm gonna jump ship, right? So it's being that safe space that says, and screw up, still gonna be here. I'm not gonna change. We're just gonna pick up where we left off and keep it moving.
I think I just had an image come to mind of, you seen The Equalizer with Denzel Washington?
Dude, I love the Equalizer movie.
So there's a
Got 9
scene.
seconds.
There's a scene where he's with that kid who's making bad choices, he's hanging out with wrong people,
Right.
and he grabs the gun and he's like, "Are you a killer?"
Yeah, I remember that.
I think the misconception of what tough love really is the problem.
Well, I
'Cause
think a
tough
lot of
love,
people use it for a cop out.
tough love is being honest and open about what my brother needs to hear and see. Because that is a prime example. There's a couple other guys in the studio right now that Angel knows this.
Yeah.
That is the tough love. Are you a killer? Because it takes a certain kind of human being and an absence of emotion to really be a killer. But at the same time, it takes an overwhelming abundance of love and emotion to provide real tough love. And if you got kids, you understand. Like, you got to correct your kids. You got dogs, you understand that dog still loves you even when you're rubbing his nose where he just wet, right?
Yeah.
But the idea is to correct and guide and do it in love. And we don't know how to do that today.
No.
It's just not the same out there.
Part of my coaching is, man, I adopted this unconditional concept, right? Where I do things unconditionally, right? And I don't let my level of service affect, or I don't let my lack of income affect my volume of service. 90% of my job is service work.
When I think the misconception, another
And that will
misconception is
teach you an unconditional concept.
people think you got to
alone.
have a ton of money to do that. No, money makes it easier, but it's not about the money. It's
No.
about that service. It's
Right.
about the heart you approach it with.
You know, and to we've been doing this. We've had the show going for what, about 6 months, 7 months,
7 months, yeah.
7 months, and we've had the privilege of reaching 100,000 people, man. 100,000 people, and we got about 2,500 followers, all together. But if you play the odds right, and you say 1 out of 10 make it, in the last 7 months, I think we've done a really cool thing.
The difference would be that we don't quit. Because it's not about whether or not we've got a massive following. It's about, are we being effective?
No, it's not about the following. I'm just talking about the level of service, right? If you play the odds, what's 10% of 100,000? 10,000 people in 7 months, right?
And
that's awesome.
And look at the people that you get to work with
Yeah.
now, right? 7 months ago, you didn't have a coaching program.
No.
You had an idea.
I had an idea.
And now you have clients. You have people that come to you that you support. So that service is important.
And it took a really big leap of faith that when I had my God moment, my aha moment, right? Like I was saying, I was reading that book and I felt like God laid it out for me. This is what I want you to do. I had no idea how to accomplish that. I came fresh out of jail. Wife picked me up from jail and I was like, we should start a business. And on the way home, we came up with the name and then it was like, maybe we should do a podcast. And so the next morning we went out to Medi Park and we started shooting and it's just kind of mushroomed out and grew into this big old thing in less than a year.
And it's just got nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing events now. We're part of other outreach programs in town. We're able to take programs into other treatment facilities. It's really cool.
So tell people how they can support you.
Right now, you can support the Better Days Rain mission. We have our Printify store up. We can sell T-shirts, coffee cups, mugs, journals, bumper stickers.
You even got candles out there.
Yeah, we even got candles. Really good candles. I actually got one of the candles, the coconut one, and it's awesome. It is really awesome. But that's a great way to support the Better Days Rain mission. It helps us to where we're able to broadcast this show here at Warrior Garden Studios, who we are very grateful for. And it's also enables us to be a part of community events and help spread the message of recovery throughout our town and really throughout the nation. To be honest with you, I think we're about worldwide now. Though we got some viewers in Australia, UK, Middle East, China, all over the place. So it's grown into something really big. But of course, it all costs a little bit of money. So if you would like to support the Better Days Rain, you can also reach me at Shawn@betterdaysrain.com. If you're ever interested in coming on as a guest for the show or, need some coaching, want to have a coaching group brought into your church or into your facility, I would be happy to facilitate that.
You can schedule that right on the website.
Yeah, you can schedule that right on the website. And we're up on just about every major platform you can think of. YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Spotify.
Just threw new audio out on.
Yeah, we got a new one out on Spotify. We just dropped it this morning. It should be up at 2 o'clock?
Yeah, 2 or 3. Yeah.
Yep. And then we just dropped a new episode yesterday on YouTube. Yeah, man, reach out. We'll be more than happy to help and be of service. Thank you.
Go.